On March 13th, 2009, on the outskirts of the city of Irkutsk, Russia, a group of homeless people were rummaging through bins hoping to find something valuable when they made a grisly discovery. They found a nylon bag. It was heavy, and they hoped to find something of value inside. They were intrigued, but when they opened it, they were horrified. They discovered 2 severed human legs, distinctly female due to their slender appearance and red-painted toenails. Quickly, an investigation began, and even though this case had a grisly start, no one was expecting the depravity that would soon be uncovered. This case is as sad as it is brutal, and I always find it most disturbing when someone can commit such crimes, having previously had no background in such atrocities. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you are new here, then please hit the subscribe button and consider following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. To truly understand how these tragic events unfolded, we must go back to the beginning. Olesya Mostovshikova was born in May 1982 in the city of Irkutsk, Russia. Her biological father had already left the family before she was even born. Her mother eventually met a new man, a man who would become the only father figure Olesya ever knew. But tragedy soon came. When Olesya was still very young, her mother passed away. From that moment on, she was raised solely by her stepfather. She would later say, "I didn't have a father. My stepfather raised me and supported me. I always considered him my father." Just as she began adulthood, fate dealt her another cruel blow. At the age of 16, her stepfather died suddenly, leaving her completely alone in the world. Olesya would come to see that moment as a turning point in her life. She believed that if he had lived, everything might have turned out differently. No agency stepped in, and no one offered to help. Olesya was alone. By 18, she had married, and at 20, she had a husband, and together they had bought a home. And not long after, she became pregnant. It seemed, for a brief moment, that Olesya had found some sense of stability, a chance to build her own family, something she had always longed for. But at 7 months pregnant, tragedy struck once again. Her husband ended everything in the barn behind their house. The shock shattered her world. Her hopes for a future, of a family, was in ruins. Reflecting on that moment, Olesya would later say, "I don't know what came into his mind. Anyway, I leave the house and he's there in my shed. Everything turned upside down for me. And then, of course, friends, girlfriends, as always. And it all started. Calm down, have a drink, you'll feel better," they said. It was after this heartbreaking event that drink began to consume her life, a numbing escape from the pain that never seemed to end. Olesya would drink heavily most days, often going on binges for weeks at a time, all the while raising her son. But she did hold down a job. She worked as a sales assistant at an Asian marketplace, but she didn't earn a lot of money, and she would receive benefits for her son. But sadly, most of the money that came into the household was spent on drink. Her home, which should have been perfect for family life, became a gathering place for chaos, frequent drinking, partying, and a steady stream of bad influences. By March 2009, Olesya was 26 years old. Ilya was just 6. On March 5th, Olesya was in the middle of a week-long drinking binge with 2 of her friends, Yulia Seigler and Tatiana Romanchuk. She hadn't shown up for work at all that week. That evening, Yulia eventually went to lie down in the bedroom after a long drinking session, leaving Olesya and Tatiana alone in the living room. with little Ilya playing nearby. An argument broke out. Harsh words were exchanged. Tatiana accused Alessia of being a bad mother. But that's when something inside Alessia snapped. How can you tell me how to raise a youth? First, give birth. Experience the situation that I experienced at that moment. And then tell me how to raise my youth and what I should do, she said. Fueled by rage and drink, Alessia knew exactly what she was going to do. She reached for an axe and struck Tatiana, blow after blow to the face, back and chest. Tatiana collapsed on the floor, bleeding profusely, her breaths turning into a chilling death rattle. But Alessia wasn't finished. She walked into the kitchen, grabbed a knife and returned, stabbing Tatiana 51 times in the chest until her body went still. What came next was beyond comprehension. Alessia gouged out Tatiana's eyes with her bare fingers, then severed one of her ears and hand. She placed them on the stove and burnt them, and all the while, her young son, Ilya, stood watching. This perhaps proving Tatiana's point. When Yulia woke up and came downstairs, she was confronted with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Blood, silence, and her friend brutally murdered on the floor. From this moment, the case has conflicting accounts. Yulia would later claim that Alessia threatened her and said, "Help me get rid of the body or you'll be next." Alessia, however, has a different account. She says she simply asked for help and Yulia agreed. Whichever version is true, the result was the same. Together, they dragged Tatiana's mutilated body to the barn and then continued drinking as if nothing had happened. The next day, paranoia set in. What if someone walked into the barn, they thought. So they moved the body back into the house and put it in the basement. It was later, when they were hungry and realizing there was little food in the house, that things turned even more deplorable. Again, there are conflicting accounts here. Alessia insisted that it was Yulia who first brought up the idea. All this talk about there's nothing to eat, let's fry it, she claims Yulia said. But Yulia vehemently denies this. She claims that she was forced to take part in the consuming of her friend, or she would be next. Alessia then said, "We decided to cut off a piece of meat from the leg. Then we cut off the pubis, which was left lying in the basement, and the meat was brought to the kitchen, cooked and eaten." It didn't stop there. They also carved flesh from Tatiana's cheeks and other parts of her body, including her arms and legs. Over the course of a week, the three of them, Alessia, Yulia, and even Ilya, consumed the remains of Tatiana. As the body began to decompose, the urgency to dispose of it became clear. Alessia knew they couldn't simply dump the remains, as it would only be a matter of time before they were discovered. They initially tried to bury the body in the backyard, but it was freezing outside and the earth was frozen, making it very hard to dig. That's when the decision was made. Together, Alessia and Yulia began dismembering Tatiana's body. They cut off her legs and placed them in a nylon bag, and during the night, they carried the bag a few streets away and put them in a large bin. But the next day, paranoia set in. On March 13th, 2009, Alessia decided they needed to move the rest of the remains. The backyard would have to do, no matter how hard the ground. That morning, a group of homeless people, rummaging through bins looking for anything of value, made a gruesome discovery: the severed legs. An investigation was quickly launched. Police began questioning residents in roughly 50 nearby homes, but no leads emerged. Authorities didn't even know who the legs belonged to. But not long after, the authorities got the break they needed. Officer Petr Inkarev went searching a little further. He arrived at the rear entrance of 55 Liberation Street, and through a narrow gap in the gate, he saw two women digging. A strange sight, because nobody done gardening at this time of year. When asked what they were doing, Olesia claimed that they were fertilizing the soil with manure, but the officer noticed that there was no manure in sight. Suspicious, he began to investigate further and he entered the garden. On the porch, he noticed a pool of dried blood. When questioned, Olesia claimed she had killed a dog and eaten it to treat tuberculosis, a practice known in the region, though it's widely condemned. The officer was not convinced. He carried on looking around, and then, round the back of the outside toilet, he found a handbag with what appeared to be parts of a human body inside. Once he seen this, he arrested the two women, and they did not hold up any resistance. Petter then went inside, and he seen dinner plates with the remains of what he believed to be human flesh on them. He was sickened. Then, in the kitchen, there was a package. It seemed odd, as it was just in the middle of the floor. He opened it, and it was Tatiana's beheaded torso. It was missing the legs and one arm and was full of stab wounds. Quickly, the women along with Ilya were taken into custody. Olesia was opened during interrogation. She admitted to killing Tatiana in a fit of rage, but she always claimed it was Yulia's idea to eat the remains. As for Ilya, he was devastated by the whole ordeal. He had witnessed the murder, the dismemberment, and was forced to eat the meals with his mother. At first, he was sent to live with his relatives, but soon was sent to a rehabilitation center for youths, as he was damaged psychologically, and eventually he went to live in an orphanage. So sad. The trauma had left him deeply scarred. A psychiatric evaluation deemed Olesia sane enough to stand trial. She was probably on a bender by then, a district officer said. Didn't go to work. Her friend wasn't working either. Apparently, there was nothing to eat. Most likely, she did this all while heavily intoxicated. At first, Yulia was seen as an accomplice, but she later became a key witness. Authorities believed she only participated out of fear for her life. Olesia was sentenced to 8 years and 7 months in a strict regime colony for murder and the desecration of a corpse. She was also ordered to pay 300,000 rubles in damages to Tatiana's family. Cannibalism itself is not technically a criminal offense in Russia, so she was charged with the crimes leading up to it. During her time in the colony, life was hard to begin with. Those with crimes of cannibalism are targeted by fellow inmates. No one would sit with her, and people whispered about her behind her back. But in time, she found her footing. Olesia began working in the prison's sewing factory and eventually became team leader. She worked 6-hour shifts, 7 days a week, and her earnings were sent to Tatiana's family. You still get distracted by work and don't think about the fact you're in here, Olesia said. You forget about it for a while. Every day in here is the same. She became a devout attendee of the prison church, praying morning and night, seeking forgiveness. Her own family, however, never forgave her. They refused to respond to any of her letters, and she never heard from them again. Despite her crimes, Olesia began planning for life after prison. With only an 8-year, 7-month sentence, she knew she would one day have a life after prison, unlike Tatiana. Olesia said, "I want a new life, not like before. I used to not go to the theatre, but now I would go with pleasure. I would ask my son for forgiveness for not being able to be with him." A deputy at the colony she was incarcerated at said, "She is crying because she got a long sentence. The woman hid the crime for 7 days. I believe this was deliberate. There is some kind of animal instinct in her eyes. I have seen such a gleam only a couple of times. These are not the eyes of a killer, but it's better not to meet such a person on the outside." Olesia was released in 2018. She has since changed her surname, sold her home, and left Irkutsk to start over. Reports say she has remarried and has limited contact with Ilya. She said to reporters a few years after her release, "You know, I have a different life. I want to forget all this, like a bad dream, but everyone reminds me of it. I have already served my punishment. I have atoned for my sin before the Lord. Get away from me, everyone. It really stuns me that she got 8 years and 7 months for crimes so horrific. She was obviously in a bad place and most likely severely depressed. But Tatiana didn't get a second chance. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.